Some people accuse me of homebrewing D&D rules or making changes and totally unbalancing the game. They're not wrong. Welcome to Armor Rules version 2.0. Never wanted to just sit down and take the rules as written. I thought it might be time to actually add in some little minutia to armor rules in D&D without actually going too crazy down the rabbit hole and starting stat keeping and tracking, etc. One of the things that I often think about is, why does player armor last the entirety of their life? I mean, rules as written, there's nothing to stop a player from wearing the same suit of armor for the entirety of his adventuring career. I thought that was kind of a missed opportunity and a way to sort of inject some flavor into D&D. I mean, that armor is protecting them quite a lot, so stands to reason it's going to take some wear and tear and take some abuse. So Armor Rules version 2.0 is a way to bring in a little bit of realism without going too far down the rabbit hole and making your players keep track of all sorts of minutia and rules. Follow me and I'm going to break it down for you. Armor in Dungeons & Dragons is the primary means of determining your armor class as well as your dexterity attribute. All characters in D&D have a baseline armor class of 10, and depending on how heavy the armor is, the dexterity modifier is then applied to this new armor. So take for instance at a base level, leather armor has an armor class value of 11. That means that armor gives +1 to a baseline armor class for a player. Leather armor doesn't have any restrictions on what kind of dexterity can be applied to it, so in theory that player can add up to a modifier of +4/+5 to his leather armor, resulting in a pretty high armor class. But what if that player wanted his armor to take the brunt of an attack? Not only did he want the benefit of +1 to his armor class, but maybe he wanted his armor to soak up, if you will, some of the damage that he had coming to him in this particular attack. Let's walk through the basics on how to use this new armor system to actually mitigate some of the damage that player is going to take. With the Armor Rules version 2.0, armor can be used to mitigate actual damage a character takes from an attack. Not only does it increase the character's armor class rating, but the character can actually actively decide whether or not he or she wants the armor to actually absorb some of the damage that they take. After a successful attack against the player, he or she may reduce the damage of the attack by half, but must immediately lower the armor class of the equipped armor by 1. This new armor class number replaces the old AC for the character. So in the case of a leather armor, if that character decides to use it to mitigate half the damage that he just took, that armor is now rendered useless. It has become 0 as far as the bonus goes. And in that case, the armor has reached the point where it is broken and must be replaced. Now, we do have rules for repairing armor, but let me give you another example of how this would work in a better piece of armor, maybe a little bit more durable. Let's jump over to the opposite end. Say a character has plate armor, and it provides him with an armor class of 18. It doesn't allow a dexterity modifier due to its weight and awkwardness, so the character has a total AC of 18, with a baseline of 10 still. So that armor gives him a +8 bonus to his armor class. Now, having said that, if the player wants to use these optional rules, he can quite literally half the damage of all the attacks coming at him up until 8 times. So each attack reduces the armor class of that armor down by 1. So that plate armor, after reducing or mitigating the attack damage of 1 time, would have an armor class of 17. If the player decides to do it again, the armor class has an armor class of 16, and so on. As the player uses the optional armor mitigation rules, his armor class is going to drop, reflecting the wear and tear that plate armor is taking. Again, once the AC of that armor, the bonus, drops down to 0 bonus, meaning he's at his baseline armor class, the armor has been broken and must be replaced. But remember how I said earlier that you can actually repair a suit of armor before it gets to that point? Well, we're going to talk about that next. So let's talk about repairing armor. If a player wants to repair his or her armor before it breaks, that is, before it gets down to a 0 armor class bonus, it's got to be taken to an armor. Kind of gives armorers and blacksmiths a thing to do now. The cost for repairing a damaged suit of armor may be less than buying a new suit, but it's up to the player to decide when that is the case. They may want to keep carrying around an old beaten up suit of armor because they're not willing to spend money on a new suit, or they just lack the ability to because they're in the middle of a dungeon. The formula works as follows. Take the total cost of the armor and divide it by how many armor points it has. Now what I mean by armor points is that how many points of armor class it adds to the baseline armor class. That becomes the cost per point to repair the armor. So for example, a suit of plate armor costs 1500 gold and has an AC rating of 18. This means that it has 8 armor points that a player can use to mitigate damage. Take 1,500 gold pieces and divide it by 8 equals 187.5 gold, or 187 if you just want to round, per armor point. Now, each time the armor is repaired in this fashion, I recommend that you increase the cost of repairing the armor by 10%. It goes without saying that the more times you repair an armor, it's going to get more costly and more parts are needed. Now, you're probably asking about magic. Magic armor don't need to be repaired. In fact, mitigation works a little bit differently with magic armor. Magic armor can replenish armor points after a long rest without needing repair. That's not to say that the armor heals itself, just needs a little bit more time for its magic to replenish. It's not a perfect rule, but it's better than saying that they have unlimited mitigation. Well, I hope you found something to latch onto in the Armor 2.0 rules that might add a little bit more realism to your games and maybe deliver something that your players are looking at as far as armor degradation and how all the wear and tear of your armor actually affects the stats of your armor class. I appreciate all of you watching my videos, and I may not be the loudest voice in the D&D community, but I'm going to keep making videos and keep sharing my opinions and ideas with you well into the near future. Thanks for subscribing, and I hope you're all having fun playing Dungeons & Dragons out there.